Diamonds in the sunset, now your time has come.
All right, just about 7 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this one. I kind of hesitated there. I thought I heard something weird in my headset. We have been, for the last couple of weeks, promoting an event that's happening this coming Saturday over at the Ocala-Marion County Library headquarters here on Silver Springs Boulevard. It is the 2013 Book Feast. This is where you and I get to go to the library and not only read the work of some very talented authors, but get to meet the authors themselves. There are, I have no idea how many Lee Schwartz and the folks over at the library have invited, but I know we've met some really talented authors. We have one in the studio right now. He is David J. Mather. He served in the Peace Corps in Chile, I think. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And that was from 68 to 70, and you're an historian, and your book is called One for the Road, and this is actually a novel, but based on real events, which is why we kind of wanted you all by yourself as opposed to some of the other guests that we've teamed up with others, simply because when there's a novel and it's completely fictional, it's kind of like, okay, you don't want to talk too much about it because you got to hold back something. And not that we'll give away anything in your book, but it's just whenever there's a historical novel for me has more room to kind of chat about what the book is about. And this one is called One for the Road, David J. Mather, and your beautiful wife sitting behind you, I presume?
That's right. Lindy. Lindy is her name.
Linda.
Lindy.
Lindy. Okay. Good morning, Lindy. Sorry I didn't meet you all both before we went on the air. David, good morning. Thank you. Let me turn around and not be rude. I'm not trying to be rude. It's just the way this is set up. And the new studios won't be set up this way. So that's a good thing, right? Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Robin said you drove, 2 hours to get here?
Yeah, we live in Horseshoe Beach, Florida, which is 2 towns north of Ocala.
Not
Ocala, of Cedar Key.
Of Cedar Key. Oh,
Right.
wow. You're on the
Right.
West Coast.
Right.
Okay, wow. That's a beautiful area, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I love that area.
Old Florida.
So you are coming to Ocala to be part of the book feast. Were you part of it last year?
No, I wasn't. No.
Oh, wow. Now, the history that you study, is it Florida-based? Is it international? What's your area of history? Is it everything?
Well, I majored in history, but I have no expertise. I never used that degree in what I chose to do later on in life. In fact, the experience in the Peace Corps really sort of very much strongly influenced those choices in life, and so I guess you would say I've led a different kind of life from most people since then.
Now tell me about the book, One for the Road. This is a novel.
Correct.
But it's based on actual events?
Yeah, I have some Peace Corps buddies that actually say that, jokingly, that it's, and they're not too far from the truth, that it's memoirs masquerading as a novel.
Ah.
But there's a lot of, I wanted to write it for 2 reasons. I was in the Peace Corps 45 years ago, and this was, of course, before cell phones and all that. When we were out in the boonies, we were out in the boonies.
Yeah.
And life there in rural Chile in the foothills of the Andes was like stepping back into the 19th century U.S., rural U.S., where travel was by foot or horse, and water was fetched from with buckets from springs, no electricity, no indoor plumbing. And just the cohesiveness and the lifestyle there was really impressed me. And I wanted to write a book to present a clear picture of what it was like there. And also, the people that were so amazing, they just warmed up to me and opened their hearts and homes. And the book is also meant as a tribute to them. But I knew that the memoirs or my stories or anecdotal information that are in there wouldn't carry it. So I created I hope, a love story of impact, where this Peace Corps volunteer meets a very capable and very attractive campesina, lady of the campo or countryside.
Any relation to Lindy?
And the relationship slowly develops until it takes over the book.
No, Lindy. Well, Lindy's not the.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you. Well, let me put it this way: she's been the character's name, the woman's name in the book is Maria Elena, and for about 5 years now, Lindy has been very jealous of Maria Elena.
Oh no, that's too funny. That's too funny. And forgive me for my ignorance, but is Chile still like that? Does it still look like 19th century America?
No. Well, we've been back where it wasn't like 19th century America in the cities or in the towns.
Oh,
But
okay.
where I was way up in the hills.
Okay.
And but we've made 2 trips back to Chile. One, or actually both, to do research for the book, but also so that Lindy, who had heard many stories about my 2 years there, so she could meet my family and meet some of the members of the community.
That's awesome.
And it hadn't changed the first time we went back, which was '92, but we went back in I believe it was 2008.
Okay.
And it had changed up in the hills quite a bit. In fact, there was no community left. It was all pine trees. And that's what I was down there ostensibly doing.
Wow.
The area was called Cufeo, La Colonia de Cufeo, which is the colony of Cufeo. And a generation before the main character arrives, who was in the Peace Corps, or before I arrived, it was virgin hardwood forest, and the Chilean government gave tracts of land to people that were brave enough to hack out clearings. But they did such a good job, and I might add, without benefit of any modern tools. I mean, there are no chainsaws or anything.
Wow.
Just 2-man crosscut saws and big heavy axes. But they had done such a good job that it was basically clear cut by the time I arrived. So I was working in reforestation because the soil was really lousy. They couldn't grow crops there. And so their only future really was reforestation.
And when you use the term brave enough to clear out the land, is that because there was unrest in the country at that time and there were
later on
soldiers?
There was unrest in my second year in the Peace Corps, but no. When they settled it, when I say brave enough, I mean there were no paths, there was nothing. It was virgin hardwood forest, and there were a lot of pumas or mountain lions. For example, when I was there, and this is a generation later, there was an outhouse which was outside my bedroom door, and about 30 or 40 feet away, and I can remember getting up and heading out there and finding a lamb that had been totally torn apart by a mountain lion. And I mean, it was nitty gritty. There are a lot. I mean, there are hundreds stories I could tell you. There are several in the book. For example, everything, as I said, doing reforestation, I had to do a lot of traveling and in the campo, and I had to do this by horseback. And I had never had any horseback experience to speak of. And so it was sort of a crash course in what literally crash course, the way that I quickly learned how to ride was that in school, both high school and college, I played soccer. I was a pretty good soccer player. And that really helped me be accepted into the community because soccer, as we all know, is
that's probably
International,
exactly true. Would the accordion have helped?
I'm sorry.
Would the accordion have helped?
Probably.
I watched this thing, and it's like every South American country has an accordion thing going on. Am I right about that?
Well, we have a volunteer in my group who played the accordion, and he was very popular.
So accordion and soccer will get you in South America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But let me continue, and that is that we would ride by horseback in the summertime, the dry season, to round-robin tournaments where maybe 7, 8 teams would come, and there was single elimination. So if you lost, you were out. And if you got put out early enough, you'd sort of hang around with your team, and they always had wine in Chile at these soccer events.
Yeah.
And so your teammates would tend to drink a little too much wine.
Oh no!
And then on the return trip, it was like kids that have had too much to drink here at parties, except instead of cars, it was horseback. And I'll tell you, that was a learning curve to trying to keep up with them on the way back. So I learned how to ride very quickly.
Oh, no, that's too
But
funny.
one anecdotal story that shows how it was really like out of the Old West was I went to a soccer tournament, and while I was playing, my horse and a Monte de Castilla and some other things were stolen. And the community was just really upset. And one fellow, we spent the whole night on horseback, pitch dark, I don't know how he could see, galloping around, going to different homes to see if anybody had seen my horse. And they hadn't. We showed up at daybreak where I lived, and one of the brothers of the family that was there was just mortified. And he had shoed my horse, so he knew what the hoof looked like. Now, at this soccer tournament, there are probably 50 horses. that had been there.
Right.
And he could pick out that horse's, my
Wow.
horse's track. He tracked it through the woods. And there was a trabajador who had moved in. That's a worker, and not a family that owned property, but a worker who had been, some animals had been disappearing over the last few weeks before that, and he was suspicious. And I followed the tracks to that house, but went by and continued on to another house, alerted that family. They kept an eye on the trabajador, and it turned out that he had he let the horse go. The horse showed up the next day, but he had buried an expensive saddle in the dirt floor of his shack, and they caught him on his way to the nearest town trying to sell the other items that he
Well,
had
clearly
stolen
he
from
was the guy then. I mean, you had.
Oh yeah, they caught him, but it was just it's the old West. I mean, to pick that, I mean, it's like out of looking Bonanza or something.
I want to be sure we're fair to the book and the story in the book. I guess we're touching on the story by hearing your stories. But I have a question for you.
Yep.
It sounds like, well, two things come to mind. It sounds like you went there to give to them, and you actually got from them. You actually received something
Absolutely.
as a result of this.
Absolutely.
It also seems like, and elaborate on this if I'm right, and tell me I'm wrong if I am, but it seems like these 2 years defined the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
And in what way did it?
Well, when I was privileged, I had a privileged youth. I went to private high school. I went to
Where? Where'd you go?
Deerfield Academy in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And then went to Bowdoin College in Maine, small liberal arts school. And like I say, I was privileged. And but when I lived there for those 2 years up in the hills, I just came to learn that we really don't need all the stuff we have. We can live simply and be very happy, and maybe even happier. So after the Peace Corps, rather than going into something scholastic or into the main business world, I chose to build a homestead out in the woods of New Hampshire, which is a mile off grid, and lived there ever since, although we are now residents of Florida recently.
Oh, wow.
And we still go up to New Hampshire to that cabin and the summers and falls, and it is still off grid, still an outhouse. And I'll tell you, it can get 30 below zero up there.
Did you cut down the trees yourself?
I cleared the land. There had been an old farm there, so it was second growth, hardwoods, but I cleared enough.
Wow.
And then just used wood for heating and wood for also for cooking for a while, but then gas.
So in writing the book, how long did it take to write the book?
It took me 5 years. It was my first attempt.
Wow.
And I had a lot of, I asked a lot of questions, and I talked to a lot of writers, and had as many people as I could read it. And one lady author from Cambridge gave me some really good advice from Cambridge, Mass. And that was, she said, have as many people as you can read the book and get their feedback, and take it all with a grain of salt unless different people say the same thing. Then you should pay attention to that. And that's
That's a
very
good
true.
piece of advice.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
good. Well, criticism is something that can help us if indeed you can see that it's true criticism. Like,
Sure.
and that's a good way to determine it, is if several people are saying the same thing. So, is it possible that you started writing the book because you missed it?
Oh, well, I'd wanted to write about it forever.
Was it a way of going back not only to Chile but to those years? Was writing about it kind of your way of going back in time?
I never really left there. I mean, it was on my mind a lot. As I said, it totally influenced my life. And I realized that after a couple of years, I mean, it dawned on me that I had cloned my existence from Chile into
Wow.
to New Hampshire. Really.
An interesting, I'm just going to compare notes a little bit with you. I never went to a place that was similar to 19th century America. I did the exact opposite. I went to the Los Angeles area where materialism was in abundance. So I was exposed to this over wanting of cars and houses and things, and that made me want to say, you know what, I don't need or want any of this stuff. So the exact same results from two different experiences. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So tell me about now you wrote this as a novel.
Right.
Obviously, we've learned so far that there's a romance in here.
Right.
And you did that. Is he a romantic man, Lindy? Very, very, okay. But I mean,
what do you expect her to say?
I'm teasing. I'm just having fun because she's in the room. I can do it, right? But I mean, are you a fan of romantic stories in general?
Oh, as much as, well, probably more so than anybody that chooses to read nonfiction. Yeah, I guess I would say I am. I think my favorite book.
As much as anybody who chooses to read nonfiction. That's interesting. And because I'm like that too. I like biographies.
Yeah.
And when a biography is talking more about their lives than the legislation they passed, let's say, then it's more interesting to me. And their lives always have, romance in them. So if it's a man, there's always a woman in there. That's an interesting part of the story.
Yeah, but to what extent is that romance part of the book, whereas in fiction it might be a much larger...
Might be big. Okay, I see what you're saying. So that's part of the story, but the big story, what do we come away with as readers? Do we visit Chile with you?
Absolutely. I would like to say that probably my biggest fans, I've had a lot of really good feedback and from travelers, from people that like to experience other cultures, and it's been really great. It really has been good feedback about that I've presented that, because how could I not? I mean, I lived it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, I really lived it.
Does Chile speak Spanish or Portuguese?
Spanish.
Spanish. So did you learn to speak Spanish?
Oh, I had to. Yeah, let me just say this, that the Peace Corps in training, which you go for about 6-8 weeks, I can't remember exactly now, and when you leave, I mean, they're trying to teach as much language of the host country as possible, but when you leave, they grade your Spanish, the instructors, from 0 to 5. 5 being fluent, 0 being nothing.
Uh-huh.
I left for Chile with a 1-.
Oh! You didn't know.
And I replaced a volunteer who didn't live in the hills, but he dealt with the people there, worked with the people there. He lived in the city. But he took me up into the hills. He had found a campesino family that would allow me, they had an extra bed, cot, and I was going to live with them. And here I am, 1-, and he takes me up there.
How could it be 1-?
Introduces, they're being polite probably, is why I got a 1-. Introduces me to the family. I can barely follow what's going on, and then he has to catch the next bus to town. He leaves. I'm there.
Oh.
What do you do? Where do you start?
Oh, wow.
And there's no office to go to. It's just, and they say in the Peace Corps training, you might as well write off your first 6 months, because it just takes you that long to learn the ropes.
Oh, wow. So what was the first words? Was it the people's names in the house? And
Well, one thing that is interesting.
bathroom? Where's the bathroom?
There are certain things you knew going down. But every time you ask a question, it sort of rings bell. I can just sort of talk about different things. But one thing that I learned right off the bat is the element of respect that is in the campo. If you are in the city, you have a formal you and a informal you. Tu is like informal, usted is formal. In the city, I was tu from everybody. In the campo, I was always usted. And instead of David, they would call me Don David. And you always address the men with Don before it, sir. Don Tomas, Don Elogio. And you always called the senora, never by her first name. You always addressed her as senora.
Really?
And if you were referred to as tu in the campo, that meant you had lost respect, because children, animals, and people with no respect were referred to in the personal
See,
tense.
that's so
and if you
different.
lose the respect in the campo, forget getting anything done.
That seems contrary to what we learned in Spanish class, which is all my extent of Spanish is. It seemed like two. Rob and I would be two to each other.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean I disrespect her.
No, but that's just it's the culture. I mean, where you are. I mean, that's the culture in the hills was different than the culture in the city.
Wow.
And dialogue did play an important role in your book.
Who did? I'm sorry.
Dialogue plays an extremely important role in your book.
Have you read parts of it?
Yes.
Or? Yeah,
yes, I have.
Good.
Yes.
And have you written it in Spanish as well? Is there a Spanish version of the book?
No, there is not a Spanish version, but I made this whole thing has been a learning curve.
Uh-huh.
And one of the first things you have to do is register the title of the book. And Lindy checked into it. Lindy's the computer whiz of the family, and she did a lot of the groundwork for this thing. And but we looked up. I originally had the title in Spanish with an English subtitle, and the title was Uno para el Camino, one for the road. And she looked that up, and there was no Uno para el Camino, so we thought we're golden. But then we talked to people and learned that, someone sees that in the bookshelf, they're going to think that's in Spanish. So
Oh,
Yeah.
put it in English.
Yeah.
True, that's true.
So
yeah.
we titled it One for the Road. Unfortunately, we did not check to see if there are other books by the title One for the Road. So it's very difficult to bring this up on Amazon without a half a dozen drinking books. Or,
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Oh,
you
wow.
really have to go One for the Road dash Mather to get it to come up right away.
Okay, that's a good tip.
It's Frank Sinatra's fault.
That could be. That could be.
There you go.
All right. David J. Mather is our guest. His book is called One for the Road. He is in the studio. Drove 2 miles from where is it again?
Two hours.
2.5 hours.
2 hours, not 2 miles. I'm sorry. Big difference. And where are you? North of Cedar Key.
2 towns north of Cedar
What's
Key.
it called again?
Horseshoe Beach.
Horseshoe Beach, okay. And he is going to be at the 2013 Book Feast on Saturday. Remember, it's only from 11 till 2. It's a 3-hour event. You don't want to miss it. Don't go too late, because last year it wrapped up, but it was very, very successful last year. I encourage everybody who is an avid reader to go. I'm sure there's a book for you, regardless of the genre that you like. David, we do the show live. I hope you can see that. You're in here. But I mean, they're listening live. Good morning. You're on the air with David Mather.
Good morning, Mr. Mather. Your discussion on
You put the headphones on.
grammatical courtesy and protocol in Chile reminded me of when I took Spanish in high school. And we were taught the Castilian Spanish.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, I was in the Navy, and then one of the places we hit was Puerto Rico and then Cuba. And the dialects in both places were just so totally different that when I learned, I just figured I will never understand Spanish, period. And it wasn't until I got to Spain
Right.
that I'm walking along a street there, main drag in Barcelona, and all of a sudden I'm hearing words I could understand.
Well, that's very true.
Huh.
And like you said, you didn't address anybody, like a senor, senorita, or no, well, for a young girl, or senora for a mature woman. And you did use the usted, gracias or whatever. But the different names, and that brought back a lot of memories when you mentioned that, because it is different, that's for sure.
Well, Spanish in South America even has they call it by a different name. They call it not Español, but they call it Castellano.
Really?
Yeah, and there are all sorts of, if you go to Argentina, like B.A. Buenos Aires, you'll find them sort of speaking with an Italian lilt. In Chile, they have it's tough sometimes because they cut their S's. For example, mas. There's an expression, listo no mas, which means I'm really ready, let's go. But they'll say listo no ma. And so there's just a lot of Peruvian is probably I've been told, and I've been there, but is the clearest. But it varies from country to country, and also depends,
Right.
too, maybe on the percentage of Indian population.
Well, anyway, as far as let's going, the only thing I sticks with me is vamonos. Thank you.
All right.
It's a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Dave, we have all enjoyed listening to you. Nice to meet you, by the way. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
I could have listened for another hour or more. The book is called One for the Road. David J. Mather will be at the library on Saturday. Are you selling your books on Saturday?
I sure am.
So they'll be for
Hope
sale.
to.
And plus, they are online. Do you have a website?
Yes, it's www.onefortheroad Mather, MATHER.com.
Okay, and if you missed that, call us. We'll be glad to repeat that.
And I would like to say one thing. My wife set up the website, and if any of this interested anybody out there, there are about 20, 25 pictures on that website taken 45 years ago down in Chile. And as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Wow. I love the stories that you were able to tell us today, David. Thank you for coming in. Lindy, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in. And we will close it right now. Thank you. We'll take a little break and be right back. This is The Source, WOCA.
Hey, Larry, nice haircut.
Oh, thanks, Robin. Looks like you had something different done, too.
Yes, I did. Thanks for noticing. I went to Lupe at Merle Norman on the Boulevard for a fresh cut, some summer highlights, and a facial.
No kidding. That's who I go to. I didn't know she did all that.
She does coloring, waxing, styling, updos, microderms, and she does it all for prices that won't break the bank.